So what is a crisis? Well, the dictionary says a crisis is a time of intense difficulty or danger. Got it. That's a crisis. In the medical field, if you ask them what a crisis was, they would say it's a turning point. When a patient is in a crisis, they're at a turning point where it's either going to get better for them or it's going to get worse for them. If you go just to the Greek and how they defined a crisis was they said it's a decision. So I took the three, the dictionary, the medical, and the Greek words, and basically let me tell you what a crisis is. A crisis is an intense time of difficulty requiring a decision that will be a turning point. That's what a crisis is. It's an intense time of difficulty. That's what the dictionary says. Requiring a decision. That's what the Greek says. That will be at a turning point. That's what medical people say. And that's why I'm sharing with you how to lead through a crisis. Because as a leader, we can make a difference. You see, Max Dupree said the first responsibility of a leader is to define reality. And the reality is, this is a crisis. We need to take it serious. We need to do everything in our power to make sure that we do the things that are necessary for us to be able to slow it down, stop it, turn it around. But here's what I know. Just like every other crisis in the world, there have been thousands of them, my friend. Thousands of crises. Like every crisis, the wisest man who ever lived was named Solomon. And what did Solomon say? This too shall pass. So back in 1918, when the Spanish flu affected 25 million people, and in 25 weeks they died, 25% of the world population was infected with that flu. Wow. Dark, dark days. This too shall pass. By the way, those words, this too shall pass, not only encourage us during a crisis, but they sober us up during the good times. Because in the good times, we want them to last forever. And I can tell you right now, when things are at the very best and your business is going great and your health is going great and your family is doing well, this too shall pass. Life never stays static. A crisis, it's common. The second comment on crisis is that a crisis is distracting. We use the term distraction, but I want to insert in this teaching right now the word traction, because traction is the opposite of distraction. You see, traction means to pull forward or to draw forward. It means that there's a momentum to move in the right direction. You've gained traction. You're making progress. Distraction is the opposite. It means to pull away. So when a crisis comes, it begins to pull us away. It begins to distract us. It begins to take us off course. It begins to confuse our priorities. It keeps us from making progress. So if traction is the action that draws us toward what we want in life, distraction are the actions that pull us away from the things that we want in our life. If you want to get distracted, just watch the TV news. Wow, I think we just need to fast from some of that. Honestly, their agenda is not always accurate reporting. They've got an agenda behind them. And let me just say this. As a leader, I hope you have no agenda except you put the people first every time. You see, that's the only thing as a leader that's going to keep me from falling and being a bad leader, because there's not much difference between manipulating a people and motivating them. Manipulating people is when I move you for my advantage. And so many times during a crisis, that's what leaders do. It's always wrong. It's wrong for leaders to do it. It's wrong for politicians to do it. It's wrong for the media to do it. It's wrong. What part of wrong don't we understand? But when we put the people first, when we have no agenda except lift people, serve people, add value to people, it helps us to keep some sort of traction in a time of distraction. Well, what's the results of distraction? Mind wandering. What do? Our mind begins to wonder. We begin to ask questions like, what could happen and what is happening and we begin to ask questions that there are no answers to. Or negative thinking, everything is going wrong and it's never going to get better. Or an uncertainty, anxiety, where we begin to look around and we begin to be dominated by fears. And let me tell you something, this crisis is a perfect storm. It's a perfect storm. It's a perfect storm for distraction. And fear is spreading faster than the virus. I say this in kindness. Just because your sky is falling doesn't mean my sky is falling. Now, are we in the same crisis? Yes. Are we in the same danger? Absolutely. But do we have the same perspective? Possibly not. I mean, my life has gone to pieces as far as my agenda and my priorities. I write, I speak. For April, May, I was traveling around the world speaking. They're all canceled. I'm not speaking anywhere. Who wants to be with people? I don't want to be with people. I don't want to speak until this thing's all taken care of. So somebody the other day called me and said, how are you doing? I said, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm making lemonade. When given a lemon, make lemonade. So what am I doing? Am I speaking? No, that's canceled. It's all changed. Hey, that's a financial fallout. That's a leadership fall. I can give you all kind of fallouts from that. Of course I can. But what am I going to do? I can't control that. Nothing will cause you more anxiety than trying to control something you can't control. And yet I watch people every day, I don't know, somehow reach out there with worry, thinking that anxiety and that worry will make things better for them. So what am I doing? Well, I'm reading books that I haven't been able to read for a while. I'm getting to write a book that I didn't have enough time to really write, and now I can write it. And because I'm writing it now, it's the most important book I've ever written. Hey, I'm getting to exercise. I'm getting to spend time with my family. I can give you a whole list of things right now that I'm doing because of the crisis. So what do leaders do? Don't miss this point. Leaders help people get traction during distraction. And the first step of getting traction is getting rid of negative emotions. Wow. I'm going to read you something now. C.S. Lewis, many of you know that name, a brilliant apologetic, a brilliant mind, a tremendous educator, a writer whose writings today are still powerfully affected. I'm going to read you something that C.S. Lewis wrote 72 years ago, 1948. And it's going to ring with amazing relevance. The only thing I'd like you to do, if you don't mind, is he was talking about the atomic bomb back there because that was what people were greatly concerned about then. They had entered into the atomic bomb age. So the only thing I guess I'm asking you to do is substitute, if you want to, the atomic bomb with the coronavirus. Let me read. Just hang on. It's worth it. Mentally stay with me. In one way, we think a great deal too much of the atomic bomb. How are we going to live in an atomic age? I'm tempted to reply, why? As you would have lived in the 16th century, when the plague visited London almost every year, or as you would have lived in a Viking age, when raiders from Scandinavia might land and cut your throat any night, or indeed, as you're already living in the age of cancer, syphilis, paralysis, age of air raids, railway accidents, motor accidents, atomic bombs. In other words, do not let us begin by exaggerating the novelty of our situation. Believe me, dear sir or madam, you and all whom you love were already sentenced to death before the atomic bomb was invented, and quite a high percentage of us were going to die in unpleasant ways. We had indeed one very great advantage over our ancestors, anesthetics. It is perfectly ridiculous to go about whimpering and drawing long faces because the scientists have added one more chance of a painful or premature death to a world that is already bristled with such chances and in which death itself has no chance at all but certainty. This is the first point to be made. And the first action to be taken is to pull ourselves together. If we are going to be destroyed by an atomic bomb, let that bomb, when it comes, find us doing sensible and human things. Praying, working, teaching, reading, listening to music, bathing the children, playing tennis, chatting to our friends over a pint and a game of darts. He was from England. Not huddled together like frightened sheep and thinking about bombs. They may break our bodies, but they need not dominate our minds, and that's huge. They may break our bodies, but they need not dominate our minds. In fact, if you're with somebody right now, I don't know, you may be in a family, with a couple, hope you're socially distancing, you're not with a lot of people, but if you're with somebody, just look at somebody right now and say, fear will not dominate me. I got a choice here. And if you're not with anybody, say it to yourself, say it out loud, fear will not dominate me. The third comment on crisis. A crisis reveals what is inside of us. You see, sometimes I hear people say, well, they were made in a crisis. Crises don't make us. Crises reveal us. When a crisis comes, whatever is on the inside is what will come out. When you squeeze an orange, guess what you get? Orange juice. When you squeeze a lemon, guess what you get? You get lemon juice. When a human being gets squeezed, what's inside, positive or negative, will come out. You see, choices make us, crises reveal us. And I want us to really understand this because we have control over our choices. We don't have control over our conditions. And if you're in a leadership role, I just want you to know you can't moan and lead at the same time. So figure it out. If you're going to lead, you and I have to be able to give people hope, and moaning doesn't give people hope. I don't know, perhaps you heard this kind of amusing about the woman who whined and basically she said, the whole world is against me. And, her friend came up and said, I got good news for you. The whole world isn't against you. And she kind of looked at her like surprised. She said, the whole world doesn't know you. Just, can you relax? I had an interesting conversation 3 years ago with a man named John Hope Bryant. Once in a while, I hope you have a conversation with people that when you finish that conversation, you walk away and you just say, I'm going to be a better person because of that. Now, John Hope Bryant wrote a book called Love Leadership. So I'm going to read from him like I did C.S. Lewis a moment ago for perspective. Now listen and just hang with me here for a moment. Most people find strength in things that are outside of them. Now that's a problem. If I find my strength from things that are outside of me, I'm going to have a problem. And then he goes on to say money, power, titles, wardrobes, cars. But most of the things that make a leader are on the inside. Integrity, wisdom, confidence, vulnerability, joy, passion, compassion, intuitions. These things come from life experience, from life's trials, from the deepest part of a person's soul. You can't fake them, and you can't buy them because they're not for sale. He goes on. My mentor, Reverend Murray, says, life asks a question of every leader that gauges their effectiveness and wisdom. The question? What have you been through? Following battle, King Arthur would have his knights line up before him and ask each one of them, show me your scars. And if none existed, he would say to the warrior, leave me and go get your scars. I've learned that authenticity counts and that the best route to an authentic life is through your scars. As you earn them, you learn to drop the BS in your life and you attach yourself to the substance in your life and to the substance in those around you. Precisely because of that, history of loss, because we've had loss. Now catch this. Because of the history of loss, you never take yourself too seriously or get needlessly seduced by short-term materialism. In other words, loss helps to ground and mature a person. There's a hard lesson in life, setbacks. Just as steel is forged through fire, leaders are forged through loss. There can be no strength, no real inner growth without the pain of legitimate suffering. It's a scientific fact. You cannot have a rainbow without a storm. Loss is wisdom acquired early. Huge. Loss is wisdom acquired early. Where's it acquired? In difficult times, in crisis. Okay, reading just one more paragraph. Wisdom comes from dealing with your mess. All of it. But few people want to do that because it's just too much. Too much work, too much acknowledgement, too much remembering, too much pain. But I have found that there is freedom in surrendering to this work, to saying, yes, that happened, but it doesn't define me. What does not kill me will only make me stronger. I made a mistake, but I am not a mistake. I'm passionate about transformation. Anybody that knows me well knows that I have a dream, a bucket list. If you ask me my bucket list, I would like to see in my lifetime one country in the world be transformed. And so we make a very concentrated, intentional effort to help countries, and soon we're going to be doing it with communities even in America, to have transformation. And here's what we've discovered. We found out that transformation is impossible without people learning and living out good values. The transformation doesn't begin by a law. It doesn't begin by an edict. Wow, I had the privilege of a couple years ago being in Saudi Arabia, invited by the family, and the king had made an edict that by 2030 that the country would be transformed. And these people were beautiful to me, and I did my best to spend 3 days with them and help them understand transformation. And my last statement was that you don't bring transformation through the edict of a king or the law of the land. It doesn't happen, never has happened. Why are you still there? Transformation doesn't happen from something on the outside. It happens from something that happens on the inside. It's a values issue. And when people learn and live out good values, guess what? They become more valuable to themselves, and they become more valuable to their neighbor. And the result? They become bigger on the inside than they become on the outside. And that's what we're striving for. Through crisis, through difficulty, we're striving to become bigger on the inside than we are on the outside. So let's review quickly. A crisis is quite common. A crisis is distracting. A crisis reveals what is inside of us. And number 4, a crisis requires adaptability. You see, a crisis usually is a case study in uncertainty. That's true of the coronavirus. Nobody knows how long the outbreak is going to last, how bad it's going to be. But here's where leadership comes in. I've often said, I love sports, that all good coaches have a good pregame plan. In other words, as they go in the game, they have a pregame and how they would like the game to unfold, and they practice that pregame. They teach that pregame. But once the game starts, it may not at all be like the pregame plan. Now, all good coaches have a pregame plan, but the great coaches separate themselves at halftime. Because now they have a half, and now they see reality, not theory. Now they know what has happened, not what they thought would happen. And so they go into the halftime locker room, and what do? They adjust. It's their ability to, now that they know what's happening, to make decisions based on what they know, not what they thought. It's their ability to be flexible, adaptable, and create an environment that allows a new game plan, a plan B, if you will, that makes those great coaches. Most successful leaders have a plan B. And during a crisis, maybe even a plan C. Now, there's a profound difference. I teach this in my book on leadership. There's a profound difference between conformity and adaptability. Don't miss this because it fits right here in the crisis. Conformity, that's a negative quality. It's about blending in. It's about being like everyone else. It's a weakness that's based on fear and rejection. When a person conforms, to be honest with you, they don't want to be rejected. So they blend into the crowd. It's not a positive thing. Adaptability is a positive quality, and it's adjusting not out of weakness but out of strength. It's adjusting to succeed. It's adjusting to give you the ability to make the changes that will make you better. I had a wonderful golf game a couple years ago with Tom Watson. What an incredible golfer he has been in the past. And in fact, my claim to fame is on number 10 at Sugarloaf. I got a birdie and he got a par, literally, and I beat him by one stroke. And he noticed, he said, "John, you won that hole." And the good news, I won that one hole, and that means in the other 999 he wins. But the point being, we had an interesting conversation, and he told me, he said, there are only 5 tournaments. Now, this man won a lot of tournaments. He's one of the top 10 golfers ever. He said there are only 5 tournaments that on the first tee, the first day, I knew that I was going to win because my swing was just good, and I was just going to win. He said all the other tournaments, sometimes second round, third round, fourth round, I had to go back to the driving range, and I had to make adjustments because my swing got out of kilter. And I had to, and I love this phrase, he said, I had to adjust my way to victory. Almost all of his tournament wins were not because he kept doing the same thing the same way and it was just perfect. He had to adjust his way. And in a crisis, that's what we do. As leaders, we help our people adjust their way to victory. Wow. Maybe you need to say to yourself or say to somebody that's in the room with you right now, I think I want to adjust my way. I want to adapt my way in this crisis. I'm going to be flexible. I'm going to be fluid. Point number 5. I'm giving you comments on crisis. And the 5th point is that a crisis is the time when real leaders show up. It's in a crisis that the real leaders become visible. You know, leadership is a visible presence. There is something that gives great security about people when they see their leader and the confidence, the calmness, the assuredness, the hope that that leader has. Recently, I was in Israel, and we were with a man named Elliot who really has a major influence upon the military in that country. And if you know anything about the Israeli army, the officers don't lay back and send in the infantrymen and the soldiers. The officers lead the way into battle. In other words, Israeli military says officers go first. They're on the front line. By the way, the percentage of officers killed in a war in Israel is higher than the infantry and the soldiers. Why? Because they're on the front lines. And we were up on the Golan Heights, and we were having an incredible day there. We learned so much from Elliot. He was such a brilliant man. I mean, he spent all morning with us, and it was like a leadership learning off-the-charts course like I've hardly ever been in. And he made a statement while I was up there, and he was talking about doing battle, and he said, in war, the soldiers should always see the officer's back. In other words, there's something wrong if they're looking toward enemy territory and they don't see the back of the officer. That officer needs to be leading the way. In a crisis, that's what leaders show up during the crisis. Now, just let me have a little fun for a moment. While we're on the Golan Heights, we had about 50 people with us on this incredible tour. We got on a tank, literally could look over and see Syria. And so we got our picture taken on the tank, and we were kind of all macho, and then I decided to have some fun. Try to be unforgettable in any kind of memory you create. So I said, let's all sing the Hokey Pokey. And I kid you not, we all did the Hokey Pokey on an Israeli tank on the Golan Heights. And I looked at him assuredly and said, at the end, I said, trust me on this, trust me on that. This has never happened before. This was a first, no one else. And you ought to have seen the soldiers, you ought to have seen the military while these Americans were singing the Hokey Pokey on a tank. But here's the point. During a crisis, leaders show up. They're right there. They're early. They're the very first to go forward. You see, there are time-tested principles of a leader in a crisis, and the fact that they're open, they're honest, they're clear, and they're the first ones to stand up and to stand out. That's what leaders do during a crisis. Inc.com just last week had an article I read about Ed Bastian, who's the CEO of Delta, and it said Delta's CEO just sent out an email about the coronavirus that every customer should read. I thought, wow, I want to read it. And basically that he set out, in the very beginning of this crisis, he said, let me just explain something at Delta. I want my customers, I want my passengers to know three things. We're prepared, we've learned, and we've taken action. That's a leader. A leader shows up early, before others, goes out front, is highly visible during a crisis. Why? Because that's when leadership is needed more than any other time. But when I talk about real leaders showing up, they not only show up early, they show up with clarity. Now, uncertainty in a crisis is a fact of life. And uncertainty, as my friend Andy Stanley would tell you, is not an indication of poor leadership. It's just an indication that there's a need for leadership. And so leaders are leading in uncertainty. So what that means is we don't always have the answer. I don't really particularly appreciate leaders that are kind of like Mr. Answer Man or Miss Answer Woman, and they are constantly saying, hey, I've got the answers, come to me, come to me. No, I think there are a lot of times as leaders, we are highly uncertain. We are in territory we have never been before. We've never had a virus like this before. There's a lot of uncertainty in the air. But uncertainty is different than clarity. We can be uncertain about what's happening around us, but we can be very certain. We can be very clear about hope. Hey, this too shall pass. Because people are not going to follow fuzzy leadership. And we have to have the courage to be able to say, I don't see all the answers, I don't know all the answers, but I do know the direction I think we should be going. And you begin to create the movement. Because what happens is clarity helps people prioritize. You see, the coronavirus is a condition that we had no control over. So now we can't control something outside of us, but we can control the choices that we make. And prioritizing what we should do during uncertain times is one of the most important responsibilities for a leader. I mean, let's just think of Noah for a moment. Just think of Noah. If the ark is sinking, the first animal that Noah's going to go to is the elephant. It's just going to pay off to get the elephant off the boat. They have clarity, they have priority. And then leaders, I'll tell you what else they do. They not only show up early, they not only show up with clarity, but they show up with hope. They show up with hope. Again, I've just come back from Israel, and I had a tremendous learning leadership experience for myself and people that went with me. And I'm going to read what Jonathan Sachs said, because this is very important about leaders having the ability to show hope to other people. Here's what he said. One of the most important distinctions I have learned from Jewish history is the difference between optimism and hope. Optimism is the belief that things will get better. Hope is the faith that together we can make things better. You see, optimism is a passive virtue. Hope is an active virtue. It takes no courage to be an optimist, but it takes a great deal of courage to have hope. I love that. We offer hope. Not because we're just positive thinkers. We offer hope because we're willing to do something together. That's why I leaped at this opportunity when the John Maxwell Enterprises said, let's get to the John Maxwell team, because to be honest with you, today we're supposed to be in Orlando with 3,000 John Maxwell team coaches. Of course, we're not doing that. So what did? We were handed a lemon. We made lemonade. We said, well, let's go live to our John Maxwell team coaches. And then, as we began to think about it, we said, well, why just keep it with John Maxwell team coaches? Why not open it up to everybody? Because we got a lot of friends out there. Tens and tens of thousands of you are watching me right now. And the reason that we're coming together is because this is where leadership shows up. And by the way, Mark Cole, who introduced me, who is an owner in the company and CEO of the whole John Maxwell Enterprises, I was so proud of him because he was in Israel with me when all of this really began to come to a peak. And I was so proud of him because I watched him have that clarity. I watched him begin to talk to the John Maxwell team tribe. I watched him as he kept hope in front of things. And my observation about Mark Cole was this, that he was in constant communication with his team. In fact, every night after we'd be done finishing our tours, he would go to his room and 2-3 hours every night. He'd be back to the States talking to the team, making sure that everybody was on the same page. And he also used his team. He delegated. It was huge. He delegated authority wonderfully. It was just amazing what he did. He constantly asked them questions. He got them involved. They took ownership, and he was very deliberate in his thinking. Very deliberate. Now, I've mentored him for 20 years, and I'll take credit for deliberate. Because the last thing people need in a crisis is for the leader to get emotionally caught up in a crisis. That's why I said that leader keeps his or her head above the crowd. You are in the crowd, but you're not of the crowd. Never forget that. And I watched Mark as he was deliberate in his thinking, and every day he kind of used me for a sounding board, and I did my best to be a sounding board. You see, for many years, because Mark has run my enterprises for a long time, we've had what we call the 3-2 count. You know, in baseball, if a batter has a 3-2 count, 3 balls, 2 strikes, that means when the pitcher throws this next ball, something's going to happen. There's going to be a hit. There's going to be an out. There's going to be a strikeout. Something's going to happen. All pitches are important, but that pitch on the 3-2 count is the most important. And so Mark, when he was running the company, because he was close to all of them, he would once in a while say, "John, we've got a 3-2 count issue," and he'd pull me in, and we'd talk about it, and then he would make the decision, but I would come in to help him. And this was a 3-2 kind of conversation we had in Israel. We knew that every day was becoming even more important with this crisis. But I watched him, and I watched him do really well with the 3-2 count. I was so proud of his leadership. Let me just say something that I could add to him and an experienced leader can add. And this is just, leaders, write this real quick. You see, you and I, when we make decisions, especially during a crisis, we need to make what I call PGE decisions. The P stands for pains. What's the potential huge loss in this situation? The G stands for gains. What's the upside? What's the potential win in this situation? But the letter E is all about experience. And the question for leaders during crisis time is, how much experience do you have leading in a crisis? Because in a crisis, intuition, sensing what to do, timing, sensing when to do it, all that comes in. And all of that is birthed out of practice of leadership in experiences. You see, explaining why you make a decision sometimes is as important as what the decision is, because it's in the why that other people are trained and developed. And I watched Mark, and his thinking, his decisions aligned with his values. You know, Roy Disney, Walt's brother, said, when you know what your values are, it's easy to make decisions. And in the John Maxwell team, I watched Mark do this. Because in the John Maxwell team, people are the highest value. And we've just come through a very difficult time with COVID, and I don't want to spend much time at all. We all understand what's happened. I just want to make 3 very quick comments. Number 1 is, because of this crisis, because of COVID, everybody moved. Everybody was moved, because that's what a crisis does. It moves us. It takes us out of our comfort zone. It takes us away from what we have always known or what we have always embraced in our life. And so the question is not where you moved in the last 16, 18 months. The question is, did you move forward or did you move backward? Did you swim upstream and improve your life, or did you drift? And by the way, if you drifted, we never drift to a desired location. No one ever drifted their way to success. But we were all moved. And what happened was the crisis took us out of automatic. We all love automatic because automatic we live in an automatic world and we don't have to really think too much. And automatic is predictable. Automatic is easy. Automatic's comfortable. We just love automatic. But I would just have you to note that everything that you need and everything that I need in our life, and I don't have time to dwell on this, I wish I did, but everything that we need in our life, everything that we need in our life, or everything we want in our life is outside of our comfort zone. If it was inside your comfort zone, you'd already have it. And so COVID just took us all out of our comfort zone, and the question was not, did we end up somewhere that was different and certainly not automatic in life? The issue and the question is very simple. When we got out of our comfort zone, did we seize that moment and get better, or did we drift? The second comment on COVID is that everybody was uncertain. You know, leaders love answers, and leaders love to be able to kind of project and envision the future, but COVID didn't let us do that, and I, like all of you, I just said, well, I have no idea. You know, I mean, wasn't the most popular question the first 90 days of COVID is, when is this going to be over? And the only people that I knew that tried to answer that were fools. We didn't know when it was going to be over. I'm not sure. I've never been here before. This is different. But the thing that really brings me to the teaching tonight is the third thought about COVID, and that is that this crisis that moved all of us, everybody was discovered. Everybody was revealed. You see, we hear a lot of times that a crisis makes a person. I don't think a crisis makes a person. I think that it reveals a person. I think when difficulty comes, we find out very quickly who the players are and who the pretenders are. And I can tell you from my heart, and with all fatherly love, I'm extremely leadership sad. I'm leadership sad for my country. I'm leadership sad for the world. But I'm most leadership sad for the church. And I'm leadership sad because I feel that we've missed an opportunity. I feel that perhaps instead of rising above the crowd and leading, we became part of the crowd. So if you'll just let me just share with you and kind of just lovingly walk you through this process, I would like to do that. I just think that you never really know who a person is until the crisis comes, until the adversity comes. I was talking with a friend recently, and I was asking about another person that I just had met. And I asked him, I said, do you know him very well? Do you know anything about the character of the person? And I'll never forget, he looked at me and said, well, John, he said, what I know is he just seems like a wonderful person. But he said, you have to understand, I can't vouch for his character. I've not seen him under adversity yet. You see, adversity on the outside requires strength on the inside. Now, Chris, when you're talking about you love the old songs, okay, now we're going to get as old as the hills now. I'm going to go to an old Sunday school song. First of all, let me just do a little. How many of you went to Sunday school? Okay, yes, okay. How many of you have no clue? Okay. In Sunday school, we used to sing a song about the wise man and the foolish man. Would any of you remember this? Some of you do. You remember this? We sang it, especially in grade school. Do you even remember the motions? Oh, let's try it. Let's try it. Come on, let's try it. Yeah, huh? And if you don't know, it's okay. It's okay. Some of you haven't been as fortunate as all of us. And some of you are less educated so that we understand. But for you, in fact, I'm not sure. I think I got it. It's been a long time, trust me. But it went something like this. If I remember right, we started with the wise man. And remember, he built his house on the what? You remember, okay? Remember? So here's the way we did it. The wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock, and the flames came tumbling down. The rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down and the floods came out, and the house on the rock stood firm. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. The foolish man built his house upon the sand, and the rains came tumbling down. Come on now. The rains came down and the floods came. The rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down and the floods came up, and the house on the sound went flat. Come on, give yourself a hand. This is huge. Oh my goodness. I'll be leading worship tomorrow. Oh, whew. Just kind of feel it. I'm so happy. So many of you, I just thought I would be singing a solo. The passage is Luke 6. And in this passage, Jesus says some amazing things. He tells us to love our enemies. He tells us to practice the golden rule, not to judge others, to give generously. And then he says, what's on the inside determines what's on the outside. He gave the story of the tree. It's on the screen. No good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit, and people do not pick figs from thorn bushes or grapes from briars. A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. And then he went to the wise and foolish builders. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not what I say? As for everyone who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice, I will show you what they are like. They're like a man building a house who dug down deep and laid the foundation on rock. And when the flood came, the torrent struck that house but could not shake it because it was well built. But the one who hears my words and does not put them into practice is like a man who built a house on a ground without a foundation. And the moment that the torrent struck that house, it collapsed, and its destruction was complete. It's interesting in this story that Jesus says that the people that he's comparing, the wise and the foolish, both of them hear his words. But the wise builder puts his words into practice, and the foolish builder doesn't. I would say to you that too many leaders today are more concerned about the outside than the inside. And this lesson is about building, not branding. This lesson is about doing, not saying. And I want you to notice that everything is fine in this story until the storm comes. Listen to me. It's the storm, it's the adversity, it's the COVID that shows up what kind of a foundation that you and I have. You see, I'm asked a lot of times, because I live in the business world, I'm asked by a lot, especially younger generation, about branding. I've got 7 companies. We've done very well. And they'll talk to me and they'll say, John, help me with branding. And I said, well, let me just help you with another thought. Why don't you just get good? Just get good. And if you get good, any brand will work. And if you're bad, there isn't a brand that can save you. And I love to take them into my home office when I can. I love to show them my first cassette kits when I went out and started sharing leadership, and I show them to them, and there were stickers on ugly cassette. I save them because they're so bad. And in 4 years, 100,000 people were listening to those leadership tapes. You see, it's not the branding on the outside, it's the building on the inside. I had a young guy, I was doing a conference, and a couple thousand people, I was teaching leadership, and he came up to me and he said, I just love what's happening today. People are loving this. They're just devouring this leadership stuff you're giving. And he said, I've decided I would like to do what you do. I said, that's great. Good for you. I said, let me ask you a question. I said, would you like to do what I did? So you can do what I do. You see, we want to do, but we don't want to did. And the did is the foundation. The did's the structure. The did's the core. But we don't want to did, we want to do. And we not only want to do, we want to do it now. And we want to have it now. And it's kind of like, well, my gosh, I've waited 2 months. We got to change the brand. Something's happened. Here's the issue. If you don't did it, you don't get to do it. And too many people want to live in do land. And they haven't spent enough time in did land. And if you don't did, then you don't do. And if you skip did, you'll be in deep doo-doo. That's kind of the modern translation of what Jesus said right there. That's right out of the Maxwell Leadership Bible. In the last 18 months, too many Christian leaders have lost their way. They followed the crowd instead of leading the crowd. They moaned instead of leading. They grieved over a lost election more than they did the loss of values. And sadly, they've been cursing the darkness instead of turning on the light. And that speaks a lot about who you are, the character within you, what your mission of clarity, your ability to pivot, your ability to adjust, your ability to work together as a team. And so the question is, how do we even become what? Panda stronger in 2021? And that's what I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about the ability to what I call leader shift. I had a wonderful conversation with your leaders on the phone as we prepared ourselves for this talk. And I want to just say right on the front end that you have terrific leaders. And I was so impressed with how much they loved you and believed in you and wanted to see you succeed in life. And when I finished that conversation, which gave me the guidance for my talk today, I felt you were very fortunate. Because you see, an organization, a restaurant can only go to the size of its leadership. So if the leadership level in the organization is low, it's just going to hit the top of that, and it's never going to go higher. But in the Panda Group, I can tell you've got a high leadership lid, which gives every one of you in your restaurants room to expand and grow, because as the leader goes, so do the people go. So with that in mind, let me talk to you about leader shift. This was a book that I wrote a couple of years ago that's become incredibly popular during COVID-19. And the reason it's popular is because it's all about how do I, as a leader, adjust? How do I shift? How do I pivot so that when things aren't going well, I can seize the moment and make an opportunity out of something, sometimes it's a very much of a difficulty. Let me give you the founding or the kind of the genesis of this book, Leadership. A few years ago, I was on a phone call, just like I was with your leaders, and I was getting ready to go to do a conference for a company. And they shared with me that their theme for that conference was fast forward. And they asked me, John, what do you think of our theme? I said, well, I like it. And then they asked me, what does fast forward mean to you? Well, I said, when I think of the future, first of all, the word fast just means faster. And what I mean by that is very simple, that whatever the future is going to hold, we can just be assured that we're just going to have to be faster. It never slows down. In fact, I'm always amazed when people say, well, I haven't made that decision yet. I'm waiting for things to settle and slow down before I make that decision. And I look at them and say, oh my. If you're waiting for things to slow down and settle, you're never going to make that decision, because that's not the way life is. It has a tendency to kind of speed up. So when I think of fast, all I can think of is in your future and my future, it's just going to be faster, faster than ever. And when I think of the word forward, it's going to be shorter. When I started off as a leader, now you have to understand I'm 73, so you got to go back 50 years. When I started off as a leader, it was very interesting. There were two things I would talk about. First of all, back when I was a leader, it was important to see more than others see. That's what a leader does. But because of the speed of the future now, a leader not only has to see more than others see, a bigger picture, they have to see before others see, a quicker picture. And when I was a young leader 50 years ago, you didn't have to do the before part. You just had to have the big picture. If you had it, you could even kind of take your time. You didn't have to go exceedingly fast. But today, forward is shorter. I mean, for example, when I was a young leader, you could have literally a 10-year long-range plan for your business. We all know that there's no such thing as a 10-year plan for your business now. And that back then was a long-range plan. A medium-range plan was 5 years. And guess what? A short-range plan was 2 years. Today, 2 years is a long-range plan. Why? Forward is shorter. Everything's condensed. Forward, shorter, fast is faster. And that's the reason we need to leadership. And yet at the same time, while we're pivoting and adjusting and being flexible, we also have to stay very true to our mission, to our DNA, who we are. I love Panda's mission: to deliver exceptional dining experiences by building an organization where people are inspired to better their lives. And I love that. When you're in the Panda organization, you are inspired to better your lives. Now, in my book, Leadership, there are 11 leaderships, and I'm going to talk about 3 of them briefly to you because I think maybe they apply to who you are and what you're trying to accomplish with your mission. So let me give them to you, not in any order of priority. These are just 3 of the 11 shifts in my book, Leadership. The first shift that I want to talk to you about is adjusting or shifting from goals to growth. I love this statement that improving yourself is the first step of improving everything else. So when people say, I want to improve the people around me, I say, well, the first step of improving the people around you is to improve yourself. Well, I want to improve my restaurant. Well, the first step of improving the restaurant that you have is to improve yourself. It all begins with you. Now, let me share with you when I made this shift, because this is just absolutely essential. In fact, each shift that I talk about in my book, Leadership, I could point to you about the time or the place that I had to make the adjustment. Sometimes I did it voluntarily. Sometimes I did it because I had to do it. But I can remember each time I had to make that shift in my leadership. And let me tell you about the time I went from goals to growth. You see, first of all, I had a mentor who shared with me when I was in my young 20s. He asked me, he said, John, do you have a personal growth plan? And I did not. I didn't even know I was supposed to have a personal growth plan. And that day, he shared with me a statement that just literally changed my life. He said, John, growth is not automatic. You do not automatically grow and get better. He also told me that if you want to go into automatic, getting older is automatic. Getting better is not automatic. So there's a difference between getting older and getting better. And he challenged me to have a personal growth plan. Wow. I'll never forget that. A little later, I listened to Earl Nightingale, who said, and this is where I made the shift from goals to growth, because I started off in my personal growth being very goal-oriented. And then I heard Earl Nightingale say that if you would spend 1 hour a day, every day for 5 years, get the picture, 1 hour a day, every day for 5 years, on the same subject, that after 5 years, you could become an expert on that subject. And I loved leadership. I was just learning leadership. And I thought, okay, I love this challenge. I'm going to take it. I'm going to spend an hour every day on the subject of leadership, every day for 5 years. And by the time I'm 30, I'm going to become an expert on leadership. So off I went. And every day I intentionally spent an hour in leadership. I read leadership books, material. I talked to leaders. I asked questions. I practiced leadership on a daily basis. I just did everything I could in the area of leadership every day. And I was thinking about that 5-year kind of time piece that Earl Nightingale gave me. And so I started literally counting down to 5. You know, it's like 5, 4, 3. I was kind of like Cape Canaveral, getting ready to blast off as a leadership expert. But something happened. About halfway in that process of every day intentionally learning leadership and counting down 5, 4, 3, about halfway in that process of 5 years, something happened within me. I began to be a better leader. I wasn't only learning leadership, I was doing leadership.
But what are you noticing? Just I know we got several points we want to get to, but just in a big picture, what is your overall, counsel to leaders when you're looking at 2023, 2024? Could be some real challenges out there.
Well, the first thing is to realize those feelings that people are having, that they're not alone. I can't emphasize that enough. Everyone I talk to, you're coaching a lot of people. I'm doing a lot of one-on-one mentoring. I have a lot of friends who are leaders. You are not alone right now if you're feeling isolated, if you're feeling a little bit scared about what's coming, because these are unprecedented times. And so what's interesting about human nature, we are hardwired genetically, whether you believe it, the Big Bang, or we're created by God, whatever your theory is, we are wired for safety. We try to avoid conflict and pain. So when we see and feel pain coming through inflation or layoffs coming, and you read it every day in the paper, it's natural to feel uneasy and uncertainty. And when the future is so uncertain, why do we as leaders feel like we should be certain?
Yeah, that's
Yet,
good.
We feel like we have to be transparent, and we should be, but the key thing is that we are adaptable, that we learn every day with what's going on. It's okay to change your plan. It's okay to adapt, but it's okay to feel uncertain right now.
You don't have to have all the answers.
No.
Yeah.
Not at all.
What?
Yeah, as leaders, don't have all the answers.
But I'd also say, too, don't go it alone. I mean, you're not alone if you feel this way, but at least type A personalities, what I've seen is, when things get complex and scary, they tend to double down, and introverts get more introverted. And I think what can happen is we go to a very lonely place, and leadership is lonely anyway. But I'll just give one example for me of an example of this. When 07-08 hit Hershey Enterprises, it's a theme park company, and our sales were down 35%. We had all this leverage because we had just purchased 2 companies. And we were up against our debt covenants where the bank might come in and say, hey, we're going to take over your loan, call your loan. You don't want that. We had to hit a certain number, and it was big. And I was taking it all on myself. And one of the greatest moments in my leadership life is I put it to my leadership team. I said, we have to find $100 million here, or we're gonna be in trouble. And I thought we had to lay off probably 20% of our people. My team came back a day later and they said, we can get to this figure if everybody takes X pay cut, we cut these projects, and we don't have to lay anybody off. And the whole Dollywood company, every leader agreed to take at least a 10% cut. The senior leaders a 25% cut voluntarily so that they wouldn't have to lay people off and we could hit our number. And my main point of all that is don't go it alone. And being transparent's okay. It creates trust. So
that is so good.
I love that story.
Yeah, that is so good. Yeah.
So
not only that, but as a leader, it just, I mean, the release you must have felt.
Oh my gosh.
The weight lifted off your shoulder. Then your ability to then even lead more effectively, to create, to take care of the people, which as you listen to Joel and you listen to our conversation last week in this episode, you can hear it through the principles of his leadership. And again, if you want more about that and just diving into his leadership and that, I just talk about his book, Love Works. Perry and I love the book. He's one of our thought leaders here at Maxwell Leadership. If you go to maxwellleadership.com in our store, we carry it there.
Thank you.
And there are other stories just like that, but that's really, the book is really about the principles that he has learned to lead through in that moment. So that was the first one, right? In thinking about in volatile times where we're at. The second one is, you mentioned move fast.
Yeah.
And I love this because John says, you know, things are faster than they've ever been, right? And here you are saying, okay, so things are going to be slowing down maybe in the economy, in the world, and people are scared. But as leaders, we need to be moving faster. Talk a little bit about this and unpack it for our audience.
If I've been through a number of crises as a CEO or just as a leader, and if I could pick one mistake I see most frequently is people don't move fast enough.
Interesting.
They think things are going to get better, and they don't have the courage, which we'll get to courage in a minute, but they don't move fast enough. And when cash is king, everyone right now really that's listening should look at their department, even their family, even their home life or their company. What can we cut that's not mission critical? How can we raise sales faster? What projects don't need to be done that we had on the docket? And that's on the expense side, but capital projects too, just all the new ideas or new software that you want to put in place. We have to reevaluate every single thing, and great leadership does that. So all those things are hard, and people don't want to do them. But no matter what you're leading, it's important to move fast.
That's interesting.
Absolutely.
I'm just thinking of a call you and I were on, Chris, you and I were on last week, where someone told us about that their, big deal they were going to do, and they had it almost signed, and then everybody reassessed and said, you know what, we're going to wait on that, and they pulled back from the commitments they had for some large land purchases and some large, investments, capital investments, and saying, just going to pause for a bit.
Perry, I'm glad you brought that point up, because when I say move fast, it doesn't mean to move fast to make action happen. It's to make the decision to preserve cash fast.
Right.
And a lot of times saying no to a deal or waiting for another year or two on that deal is the right decision right now.
Hey, podcast listeners. Do you have a clear plan for growth? Achieving big results most often does not require big life changes. Small improvements over time compound into big results. Download the Maxwell Leadership app. It's the new free app where our expert guides and John Maxwell help you pace your leadership journey and set a clear plan for your own personal growth. You can also find all sorts of resources on the Maxwell Leadership app, including this podcast, information on upcoming events, and much more. Just search Maxwell Leadership in your app store and download the app today.
Well, I don't know, we mentioned it at the top, but Joel does run our executive circle. It's a CEO coaching, and it's got some lessons, but he also do one-on-one coaching and mentoring with these CEOs. And these lessons that we're discussing here, these 5, they're something they're interspersed throughout the 12-month program. And the second one, moving fast. Third one, I love the way this sounds, but it says, construct a plan with courage over comfort.
Yeah.
Courage over comfort.
Yeah, when I talk about having a plan, it's basically what is the plan to address the crisis, whether it's don't do this deal, cut these expenses, and we have to communicate that over and over again. But at least in my experience, most leaders edge towards comfort because, again, we're wired. We talked about genetic wiring. We want to avoid pain. We want safety. We want. But if we move with courage to make the really difficult decisions and make them pretty quickly, then that's what people are looking for in their leaders. Is everyone sees the tough decisions that need to be made, so they want their leaders to do them, and I think that's really, really important. But it's also courage. When you make courageous decisions, it's not being reckless. It's not doing things that are ill-advised, but it's making those difficult decisions, whether it's a big price increase or laying off people. And again, people are looking for us to lead.
I know one of the things that you talk about when it comes to leading with courage is being transparent. Yeah. With your story you gave a little while ago about your leadership team. Here's where we're at. But I think it's even further than that. I think to be a courageous leader, no matter what the times are, is to be transparently leading and communicating with clarity and other things to your team. Would you agree with that? Would you say that through the times that you've led through, when you were more transparent or authentic with your team, that was when you were able to kind of rally the troops and keep them together at a greater level?
Absolutely. It's such a great point because transparency creates trust. And there's a balance. There's a balance between they want their leader to be strong and kind of communicate what's coming, but you have to be honest. And the best example I can think of for that for me was at SeaWorld when the animal activists were protesting our parks, and we, make a long story short, had to choose to stop breeding our marine mammals or orcas, which was not liked by a lot of the people inside the company. And I flew to each park and met with the animal trainers and had to look them in the eye and say, we're not going to breed anymore, and here's why. And by bringing them into that, they didn't like it, but they understood it. And they kind of said, if I was in your shoes, I would have to do the same thing. So being transparent and having that balance of when to share and when not to share. It's an art, but definitely err on the side of transparency.
I was wondering, it sounds kind of obvious. Most leaders would say, yes, I definitely chose courage over comfort. But when you're mentoring C-level types, do they know? You said they tend to go more comfort. It's built into our natural wiring, but do they sense that, or do they need outside point of view? How does
they? At least for me, they tend to share it because leadership is very lonely. At least I have found it to be, especially the higher up, so to speak, you go in an organization. If they aren't a little bit that way, I get concerned about them. If they're a bull in the china shop and they're just running hard without kind of being attuned to their courage, then I get worried. I like the people who admit that they struggle a little bit with the comfort and moving away from it.
Well, we've hit on this a little bit throughout a couple of these discussions, but your fourth point here, leading during these type of times, is to communicate consistently. Yep. Talk a little bit about that and the importance of that when leading through volatile times.
Well, we talked about it a little bit on the last podcast, but for those who missed it, the difference between, or the importance of clarity, lack of clarity is cruelty, but there's a difference between clarity and certainty. And I think a lot of leaders we want to be certain. We want to tell people there will be no more layoffs, or this recession is only going to be 3 months, or COVID's going to be over in a year. And so we try, we try to be certain. We can't.
Right.
We are uncertain, and we cannot predict the future. So it's important to be clear, but not necessarily certain. The second point, though, is I have seen way too many people, and I've made this mistake, try to predict the future. And so I've seen so many mistakes in the layoff announcements where people will say, this is the last one, no more layoffs. And then they have to do it again, and they lose all credibility. I just saw the Amazon CEO, this is public information, he made that announcement that more layoffs were coming the next quarter. I think the way to do that is you communicate clearly what you know today. And you say, this is as far as we need to go today, but I cannot predict the future, so that you leave yourself some wiggle room.
That's really good.
But also to say we're gonna have a massive layoff next quarter, which he did, completely kills morale. So just deal with what you have today, and hopefully you only do that 1 or 2 times versus you come back with another layoff every other week, and it's a death by 1,000 cuts. That's the worst possible situation.
Sure. Number 5, as we start to wrap up, was be optimistic, even when you don't feel like it. Does that mean even when you're not optimistic?
Well,
be optimistic.
And I think the question then becomes, well, are you being completely honest?
Right.
And we talked about that balance.
Yep.
There are some things you shouldn't say to people. Because we're all fearful. We all have that uncertainty. What if inflation goes to 12%? What if this recession lasts 5 years? What if sales don't come back? But I think what we project, and when we talk to people, we can be honest, but we don't have to give them all the information or everything that we're afraid of. So that's a balance. But in general, we should be positive because everyone's watching. And if we aren't positive about the future, who will be?
Yeah.
So
we talk about that. Everyone's watching
all the time,
right? Like I mean, we just need to be aware of that, and we also talk about how leadership is contagious. And so, to your point, you don't want to be over the top and have your head in the sand, but you also want to have some of that energy behind the optimism of it, so that your people can rest in that, or know that we're aware, we know we're in bad times, but we're on this team together, and you get that kind of camaraderie built together just by being optimistic.
And by having a plan. If you have a plan and you've communicated
it,
and people know we'll get through this, and now that plan may change every other week, but it's just important to have that plan in place.
I love what you said. I'm going to go back to, as I wrap up here, and then I'll throw it to you, Perry. When you talked about under point number 4 about communicating consistently, I can remember, during the pandemic, the certain statements that would be made, and then a week later they would, in the same organizations, would be drastically changed, and then a week later they're drastically changed, and we're just like, all right, what do we believe here? Like versus saying, as of today, here's what we're doing. This is and then you kind of, just like you talked about with Amazon, like, not only are you going to lose productivity on those layoffs until the first quarter, but then what if it doesn't happen in the first quarter? You've lost maybe 60 days of productivity, and then now you're going to be telling a different story. So I love that, of thinking, hey, how do I stay in the moment? How do we be optimistic, and then just communicate consistently on what I know and what I can share? Because to your point, we're leaders. We're not telling you, hey, start opening up the books and let's start talking about everything. No. Joel said it's an art, and it's a balance. And what I love about these conversations, and Perry mentioned it, is that Joel's heart is to help leaders and executives, C-suite leaders that are in a lonely place. And some of you are listening to this and going, man, that is a true statement, because leading is lonely at times. And so he's partnered with us, came along as one of our thought leaders, and wanted to start Executive Circle. If you're interested in being part of one of those groups and taking that 12-month journey with Joel, not only in a group of other executives, but one-on-one calls with Joel. And he was sharing with us just before we started this session, just the impact that he feels like he's able to connect with people and help them through certain situations, because what he's been blessed to go through, both positively and negatively. And so if you're interested in that, I'd love for you to go visit maxwellleadership.com. Facebook.com/executive circle, and there's a form on there. You can fill that out. One of our team will follow back up with you with more details. But Perry, why don't you wrap it up for it? But thank you, Joel. I really appreciate that.
What a great conversation. Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results.